Fatal leadership flaws. They are out there, okay? If you're an entrepreneur, you're a leader, you're any person who wants to have influence out there, you've got to get rid of these things. If you're enjoying Durand on Demand, it's probably because you're a smart person, and I know you have influence in your life. I want to hear what you have to say so you can comment. At the core of all things that you're going to do that allow you to be successful is going to be the reputation that you're building by way of your influence as it extends to others. Now, that's not the only reason that you should be a person of honesty and integrity, all these different types of things. You want to do that, as far as I'm concerned, for your soul, let alone anything else. But at the end of the day, though, you're going to have a certain amount of capital that you can use to build your business that has to do with you. And these are unbelievable fatal leadership flaws. So let's get started. Number 5, and I'm going to go in ascending order, is echo chamber feedback. Echo chamber feedback is one of the worst things you can possibly do as a leader. And actually, we have a tendency to do this all by ourselves. We don't need anybody to set this up for us, although some people do that. What does it mean? What happens? How is it practical? Well, in a practical way, you're going to hire friends that you like. You're going to hire colleagues that you like. And that likability factor is often tied to the fact that they think like you. And that's actually important. It's not something that you should not have. You should hire people that you like. I mean, hiring an unlikable person is an unfortunate circumstance on many levels. But if you're hiring people that you like simply because they're kind of giving you the yes and the nod for everything you do, you're hiring the wrong people. You have to hire people that you like who are willing to stand up with a different opinion when they have it. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to capiche to their opinion all the time. It doesn't mean that they have to yours. It means that you have to have a battle about ideas. See, you have the right person and you're outside of an echo chamber when neither one of you is arguing about each other, but you're arguing about the idea. You separate yourself from the individual and you just discuss the idea itself for its own merits. That's a very good way to do this. See, people take this further, though, and they put themselves in a circumstance just like social media, where we get into echo chambers. And that social media is designed this way, and I'll use that as a metaphor because this isn't about social media. But the metaphor is that you like a certain politician, so they're going to feed you things about that politician to get you to support that politician. And they're also going to feed you things that anger you about the opposition, so that all day long you're seeing the same thing over and over and over again until, in essence, that classic saying of, whether it's true or not true, the more you hear it, the more you believe it, right? Well, what we have a tendency to do is surround ourselves with committees and teams and groups and organization within the organization. In fact, we even do this when it comes to what websites we subscribe to, that we heard somebody that totally agrees with our professional opinion about this, that, or the other thing. So that's the one that we look for. We constantly look for reinforcement. So we have a belief bias that is in there. We can't do that. We have to look for differing opinions. And I think the best team members that I have in our organization are ones that are willing to test the ideas that we have all the time, especially if they came up with the idea. And that's an important thing to do, is to say, where might he be right about this? That's fine. But could we be going in the wrong direction with this thought? Are there experts that disagree with this idea? And bring that out in the open. It makes us better at what we do. So get rid of the echo chamber. The fourth thing is disinterested in testing data. Now, you'll notice, just like the echo chamber thing has a relationship to being disinterested in testing data, in other words, challenging ideas with experts that might disagree, right? There's a relationship. You're going to see that when I move into number 3, that's also related to number 4. But I'll get into that in a moment. So what are examples? If you're disinterested in testing data, it means that you don't really understand your business. I'm going to give you a practical example of something that I went through. I've always been a data hound when it comes to business. And so I always tell people, listen, when it comes to our company, when it comes to our customers, I don't want to just know our average order size. I don't want to know a renewal rate. I do want to know those things, by the way, absolutely. But I don't want to only know a renewal rate, an average order size, a closing percentage. I want to know so much detail about our customers that, if it's Tuesday at 12:32 and the customer's eating a peanut butter jelly sandwich and they have blonde hair with the wind coming from the southwest at 2 miles an hour, they are likely to buy this and why. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but I want to know. Why do I want to know? The reason that I want to know is the more data we have, the more decisions that we can possibly make. Now, you can go into paralysis analysis or analysis paralysis, where you're looking at too much data and it becomes irrelevant, but you want as much as you can. Now, there are internal numbers that you're going to need too. And I remember the first time that I sold a business to private equity. I couldn't believe the data hounds that they had. Their analysts came in and they cut our business in so many different ways. So one of the things that I would look at in building a company is I would say, okay, if you're projecting sales to go from 10 million in one department to 25 million over a certain period of time, I want to know why. Where's that coming from? Is that coming from ad spend? Is that coming from feet on the ground actually asking for the sale? Are we going to current clients to get that information? What about our approach changed to get that? Just because you write it on a paper doesn't mean it matters. There actually has to be a touch point. Like we touch the customer mentally, emotionally, physically in a particular way that gets them to change their behaviors, to do different things with new actions that generate those sales. And I want to know over what period of time, with how many different customers, in what sort of way, at what expense. And you have to be able to cut the numbers of your business in many different ways to see if they all support each other. Well, if we gained this many customers over this period of time with this increased average order size, even though we had a dip in a closing percentage, we could still have that outcome. Okay, well, let's adjust the closing percentage and the average order size again. Let's adjust the volume, the number of customers that we're going to in order to have that happen. Well, when the private equity companies came in, they showed us charts like I had never even thought of before, 5 different ways that I never looked at the business, and armed with that information was able to make additional decisions in order to grow the business based on the data. You cannot be afraid to look at data, and you need to make sure that you are interested in it. So if I've ever worked with executives that failed to do their job, one of the reasons they fail to do their job is they're disinterested in data. And I'll say, hey, how many? When? Over what period of time? I don't know. Didn't look. Well, we have the data. Why aren't you looking? I don't know. Well, how do you make a decision without it? I don't know. I'm just getting people all fired up. Oh, no. How about let's not do that? How about instead we actually look at the data so we know we're going after? Hey, we had a really big increase in this. Why? Where'd that come from? Oh, I gave a great speech. Give me a break. It's not your speech. There's something else that happened there. What else happened there? But the ego of that entrepreneur or that leader oftentimes self-flatters and doesn't actually consider other things. I want to know why it happened. And by the way, if it was a great speech that you gave, here's how we're going to know that. We're going to know at the exact moment that you gave that speech, what time people actually implemented your words, and we're going to be able to ask them what they did and how they changed it. And now we're going to know. But coincidentally, at the same time you gave a great speech, there was somebody else in our marketing department that recreated an actual brochure, or they placed a different ad on Facebook or whatever it might be, and they increased their spend and it went up. You tied it to your great speech. Why? Because you're an egomaniac. But that's not the reason why. Let's find out why. And the data, while data can lie, an honest person reading the data, they're not going to want to make up the lie. The third thing is related to it's fear. Now, people have a fear of the data sometimes. They don't want to know it because it makes their role look bad. They didn't do what they were supposed to do, or they don't know how to overcome it if it doesn't work. But fear is also related to other things that penetrate your organization, like competition. If people think you're afraid of competition, they're going to be afraid of competition. It's a very real thing, particularly for salespeople or people in marketing, that they're a little bit like the toddler who bumps their head at home on the table. They look up at mom and dad when they bump their head, and if mom and dad go, like they're afraid, kid starts crying right away, and they want attention. It must have been bad. But if mom or dad looks at them, they go start laughing a little bit. They go, hey, buddy, I bet you that hurt. They go, yeah, and they brush it off and they move along. This is a real effect. Now, the analogy breaks down because people in the workplace aren't 2-year-olds, but we can all act like that no matter who we are. I've done it, you've done it. And we have to make sure that we're mature in that. And fear begets fear. So if you as a leader are like all freaked out about competition and talking about it in this negative way, you can guarantee that's going to filter right down to the person that you're actually selling to. So instead, look at what makes competition great. Competition does so many powerful things. By the way, the only reason that you have competition is because what you're selling actually matters. If you have no competition, nobody wants to be in the business, and that also says something. And competitors tell us a lot. They're like having a whole branch or arm of marketing research. Why did they do that and what happened? Oh, that didn't work. I'm not going to do that. That worked really well. How can we emulate that in an honest way? So don't be afraid. The second one is not understanding the diminishing return on control. There's a diminishing return on control. So some people would say over-controlling and you need to delegate. Well, that is true, but there's an over-delegation that can take place too. So we need to know what is the time, what is the place, what are the points of diminishing return. You'll hear me say this over and over and over again. The bigger you build your organization, the greater your responsibility, but the less your responsibilities. This is the bottleneck that takes place. as soon as you find somebody that can do something as effectively as you can or close to it and they're growing into their efficiency, and you know that if you move away from that and you do something else, you have a synergistic growth method, that's when you do it. So for example, you're spending you're spending 10 hours with duty X. And you know that if you go to duty Y, okay, you can double sales. Well, if you just delegate duty X to somebody else and they are completely inefficient at it, but you're spending your time on duty Y, you're not going to increase sales because this is going to pull that whole thing away. But if you've got a person that's 80% as efficient as you, while you go over here and you can take that, 2 hours that they would be inefficient, okay, and you supplement their 80 or the 20% where they're deficient. So in other words, you don't say we're going to make this department 80% less efficient because I'm going to jump away from the whole thing, but you supplement the 20% of inefficiency that they have if they're 80% as efficient as you are. Okay, you keep the efficiency of the department, but you've gained 8 hours of time, and if you use that 8 hours of time on duty Y, you can now exponentially grow the business. So there's a point of diminishing return on when you do this. If you were to just simply jump away and that department is 20% less effective, but you're repairing everything that 20% less effectiveness brings into the organization, and now it costs you 15 hours to fix the mistake, you're not efficient. The point of diminishing return has to do with the leverage points that you have and the duties and responsibilities you have, the moving the needle. I'll give you a practical example of this. A lot of times people will spend time in the doing of planning a meeting that somebody else could plan just as effectively. But they fail to influence a person of influence in the organization. So I call this talking to people in the morning. So if you call that vice president who has many people report to them, and you find out where their head is, and you see that they're a little bit off track in what they're focused on, okay? And they've got people that are also off track, and you reset their thinking. You pull them into places they're supposed to be in mentally and also strategically. You've now impacted a massive part of your organization. And if it takes an hour to plan the meeting or an hour to do that, somebody else could have probably planned the meeting, whereas you're the only person that could influence them. Keep those things in mind. Now, it doesn't mean that planning isn't good. I'm a big fan of planning, but most meetings have a bit of a routine sense to them, and anybody can plan them and then put it on your desk and you can review it. It takes 5 minutes while you used an hour to go ahead and influence this other department. The last thing is it's kind of filtered throughout the entire thing. So we went from echo chamber feedback to disinterested in testing data to fear to not understanding the diminishing returns on control to pride. This is the biggest of anything that gets in the way. It is an absolute fatal leadership flaw. We all have it, by the way. So it's really impossible to believe that you can entirely free yourself from it. But there are certain ways that you can actually free yourself from the pride that you have. Pride is the bad breath of vice. You're the only person in the room that doesn't know that you have it. And the way that you defeat your pride is, in essence, by working through the things that we just talked about. And that's why I put them in this order. If you step away from the echo chamber, you're going to get feedback that tests where you might have had blind spots. And even against the will of your pride, you're going to have to see them because other experts are pointing them out. If you're disinterested in testing data, your pride often is the thing that makes you disinterested. You don't want to know because you know that you're not really going to work that hard to change it once you see it. Or the data might reflect something that you didn't know and therefore you feel ignorant. But if you're willing to test the data and it's in front of your face, then you're testing by stepping outside of your pride a little bit more. You're entering into an element of humility. So the echo chamber feedback, along with becoming more interested in finding out about data, it chips away. It just removes layers. Not one or two of those things makes you humble in and of itself, but it adds to your ability to flex your humble muscles. Fear, that's a big one. We're oftentimes afraid because of our pride. Our pride says, I don't want to lose. And so therefore, I'm going to bury my head in the sand about competition because I just can't face the fact that they could beat us. I have a fear. Well, when you face the competition, you have to face your pride. And it's the humility that allows you to enter into the adventure that begins when you're willing to actually lose. Not understanding the point of diminishing return on control, maybe your pride is why you're not actually delegating. You're too in control. Nobody can do it quite like me, that's for sure. Or you have a false humility, which is also a pride, and that is, oh, let me just give this responsibility to you or give that responsibility to you because, you deserve it because no, and they don't deserve it. You want to make sure that you are absolutely rational in what you're controlling or what you're not controlling. And if you have humility, you can identify the difference between when you're holding on too much or you need to let go. So those 4 things are components that actually diminish the amount of pride that you have, they increase humility, and they allow you to have success. So when you take a look at these, you can kind of invert them a little bit, which makes sense. Instead of saying echo chamber feedback, how about this? How about jumping into a room with people intentionally who disagree? Number 4, disinterested in testing data. Ask for a new data point that you never thought of, that you didn't even come up with on your own. Go to one of your team members and say, what would you like to know about our business that we don't know? And show that to me. Fear, expose yourself to the things that make you nervous a little bit more every day. Not understanding the point of diminishing returns on control, test them. What happens if you delegate a little bit more here? What happens if you hold on a little bit more here? What are the outcomes? And when you identify patterns, you can get there. And if you're open to the truth, your pride will go away and you will conquer what you need to conquer as a leader. If you're enjoying Durand on Demand, it's probably because you're a smart person and I know you have influence in your life. I want to hear what you have to say so you can comment. Let me know in this particular video. Have you ever bumped into a boss that had echo chamber feedback or too much pride? Did you ever face it and overcome it yourself? Make sure you leave a comment, also subscribe and share with others because we're going to make the world more influential in a better way.